Now, over the past 3 years of leadership turmoil in Australia, there is one politician I've felt particularly sorry for. No, it's not Julia Gillard, it's not Kevin Rudd, it's not even Tony Abbott. It's the President of Indonesia, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. Now, if you remember back when Julia Gillard took over as Prime Minister, she very quickly announced the East Timor solution. She wanted to do something dramatic on border protection, so she announced the East Timor solution without even bothering to contact SBY, without bothering to consult with the Indonesians. Then, of course, a little later, her government axed Australia's live cattle export trade to Indonesia, again without consulting the Indonesians. And now we've got Kevin Rudd back in the chair, back in the Prime Ministership. What's the first thing he's done? Again, he's trying to do something to claw back some credibility on border protection. And what's he done? He's embroiled President Yudhoyono yet again in a domestic Australian political squabble. Here's what he had to say on Friday.
I am concerned about Mr Abbott's policy where he says that he can turn the boats back to Indonesia, as he states, and when he states now more recently, only when safe, and when the Indonesian government says they will not accept such a policy. I'm very concerned about whether, if Mr Abbott were to become Prime Minister and continues that rhetoric and that posture and actually tries to translate into reality, I really wonder whether he's trying to risk some sort of conflict with Indonesia. It's not a good thing. It's a really bad thing.
Well, that's Prime Minister Kevin Rudd back in the sequel. That's very inflammatory and undiplomatic language there. But on the issue of turning back boats, which of course is only one of the policy tools in this area where a lot of policy tools need to be used, but when it comes to turning back boats, of course, Indonesia is never going to publicly welcome Australia turning back boats. There's two reasons for that. Firstly, because if we turn back boats, then the asylum seeker boats, the asylum seekers themselves, become Indonesia's problem rather than Australia's problem. And secondly, of course, no Indonesian government wants to be seen to kowtow to an Australian government. That just is bad domestic politics from the Indonesian government's point of view. So Kevin Rudd's got a couple of problems to deal with when it comes to this turning back the boats issue and the way he wants to rail against it. And firstly, of course, is the point that under the Howard government it did happen. It's happened before, it happened successfully. One of the reasons it was successful was because it was done quietly without publicly embarrassing the Indonesian government. But secondly, of course, back in 2007 when he was in opposition, Kevin Rudd himself said he would turn back the boats, that he would do this if he came into government. So to rail so hard against this now and to raise the sense of conflict with Indonesia is really quite contradictory to everything we've seen previously. I think we should look at this the other way around, and Mr Rudd should explain to us why Australian Customs or Navy personnel, if they get the chance, and admitted it might be rare, but if they get the chance to confront an Indonesian boat with an Indonesian captain and an Indonesian crew and convince them to turn around and head back to their Indonesian home port, why on earth would our Navy and Customs personnel not at least attempt to do that? Why is that being ruled out? Instead, our boats, of course, are going out, meeting these boats, welcoming them and bringing them to Australia. That's my viewpoint.